mentioned in our top of the hour promo, she is in fact a producer on Bedford Community Television. She hosts a show called Tell It Like It Is. By the way, you do great interviews.
Thank you.
Especially with the political candidates. I'm envious that they're all beating a path to your door at Bedford Community Television.
Well, except for one.
Well,
she's getting a path out the door.
That's right.
She's ignoring my latest
That's right.
invitations,
They don't like
actually.
Hey, Mike, would you tip her mic just down a little bit? Okay. Yeah, a little different than the TV mics. There you go. You got to talk right into it.
Okay, there we go.
And
thank you.
She's also a member, at least for now, of the Bedford Community Television's Board of Directors. And we say, just for now, and we'll be taking your calls this morning at 672-0573. It's 672-0573 because you've been at the center of a couple of firestorms. And one of the things we want to start off with is the fact that it now is official. There is a Politburo in Bedford. The town council having voted to approve what you call the Behavior Manifesto.
That is correct. Last Wednesday night, they made it official and memorialized it forever.
Now, for our listeners, who I know many of them know what the Behavior Manifesto is, what did the town council do and why were you fighting it? What do you think the practical effect of it's going to be on the town?
Practical effect? I think it causes a great deal of mirth with the people who live there. But
mirth, good word.
I like mirth.
But other than that, the Behavior Manifesto, as I lovingly call it, they call the Bedford Code of Conduct, and it was originally intended to apply to all of the members of any of the town boards, commissions, committees.
Elected or appointed.
Yes. And originally it was kind of long, but through the months got shorter and shorter. And among other things, the things that I objected to was this wording that one is not supposed to express a minority opinion, so to speak, but to support the opinion of the majority, which, of course, I saw as a teeny bit of a freedom of speech issue, among other things. So I did object to it.
Yeah, so
and obviously they weren't very happy about that.
No, so what it says is that if you disagree with the decision of a board, you must support the decision of the board.
In other words, dummy up.
Now, what happens as a practical matter if you violate the Behavior Manifesto? Is there a penalty clause? I'm kind of teasing this. I want you to explain it because we call it the naughty letter here on Girard at Large when we talk about it.
Yes, we do.
So apparently there's a process that's been outlined, although not codified in writing, where,
correct.
Let's just say, Mrs. Benuck, that you decided to shoot your mouth off about a decision that the Bedford Community Television Board made. Mm-hmm. You're a dissenting member on a matter.
Which I have.
And you just won't shut up about it.
Mm-hmm.
What can be done to you?
Well, as the council discussed at a public council meeting, which of course is immortalized on tape and such that anybody can watch on www.bedfordtv.com, the council discussed the process by which they might be able to put a little muscle into their code. And it's actually kind of simple. It sets up sort of a tattletale panel, if you will. So if I was chipping my teeth, whatever you want to call it, at BCTV board meetings, a fellow board member could, complain verbally or in writing to the chairman of the committee, and the chairman could then convene a meeting of all the board members except me to discuss me.
Or except any member who is thought to be violating, not just you, but any member thought to be violating.
Yes, because who knows? Maybe there'd be multiple people on some occasion. I don't expect that.
God forbid a planning board member speak out about something I don't think is right.
Oh, that would not be a good thing.
No, okay.
So the board or committee or commission or whatever it is that you would sit on could then decide that you needed to be reported, and they could draft a letter off and send it to the town council. And the town council, of course, would review it. And they could choose at that point to put it in the file, or they could choose to send you a letter telling you how very disappointed, I believe those were the words they used, how very disappointed they were by your behavior and sort of clean up your act. But, of course, the real thing is that now the file has been established on you, so when you come up for reappointment to the board, commission, or committee, should you choose to want to be reappointed, the council could pull out that little letter and use it as the basis for serious discussion as to whether you were fit to be reappointed.
So the mere act of disagreeing with the majority of the board and being vocal about it could lead to a situation where the naughty letter gets sent, and the town council will consider that when it's time for reappointment. Do you worry on a serious level that this mechanism could be used to intimidate dissenters who very well may believe that something illegal, unethical, underhanded, whatnot is going on, and might be threatened into silence with the position that they hold?
Sure. Human nature being what it is. I mean, a lot of people don't like being in the middle of a controversy. A lot of people do not want to be regarded or judged or publicly excoriated as being difficult to get along with, or whatever the council might choose to call you. So, sure, would some people probably eat up their disagreement and decide to stay silent?
So,
yeah, I would say that would happen.
So the potential that it's there to silence critics and intimidate people into either silence or a universal position. Do you see boards all of a sudden? Do you think they're going to start doing stuff like, we've had a 3-2 vote or a 4-1 vote or a 6-3 vote, and since we got this thing, we might as well make it unanimous and try to make every vote unanimous after the fact? Have you given that some thought?
That would shock me.
Because I know there are certain bodies. The Goffstown School Board used to operate by that principle. There used to be tremendous pressure brought on dissenting members to go with the majority to present a united front.
Well, that's what they're like, yeah.
So now, inasmuch as you've been the subject of some scrutiny for your repeatedly speaking out about such things as what I consider, frankly, to be the outright theft of your copyright privileges under the law by Bedford Community Television, how they're handling productions now. Do you worry? Maybe worry is not the wrong word, but do you believe that because you have been a dissenter and a vocal one at that? I mean, you blog, you have your television show, you come on the radio show here. That people will just Benuck's a troublemaker. We've got a file on her. She's not only going to not be reappointed to Bedford Community Television, but if we have a commission on Mars, we might put her there.
Well, one of my fellow BCTV board members actually sent out an email to the entire board, and I can't remember offhand if the council was copied, but in that email in which he was, again, disagreeing with me, he did state that they would only have to put up with me until March, when my reappointment would come up. And he's very friendly with a couple of councilors, so I'm guessing he might have an inside track, or at least there is. So, yeah, the possibility exists that they may say we must get rid of her.
Girard's time is 7:15. This segment being brought to us by Liberty Harbor Academy. If character and integrity matter to you, if you want your children taught from original sources, not some textbook that God knows where they got their information from. If you want them to understand their rights and responsibilities, not only in society, but in their own education and in your household, LibertyHarborAcademy.org is where you go. They are accepting applications. Phenomenal place. My kids come back every day like they just came back from Canopy Lake and they can't wait to go back. That's a truth. LibertyHarborAcademy.org. Back with Kathy Benuck after we take this 30-second break. And a quick check for traffic and weather. Speaking of email, you want to hear what's going back and forth on this.
Come join with believers of all Christian churches at the 2nd Annual New Hampshire Night of Worship on Saturday, September 22nd at the UNH Whittemore Center in Durham, New Hampshire. Doors open at 4 p.m. and worship begins at 5 p.m. There is seating for several thousand people on a first-come basis. Please register for this free event to help facilitate at nhnow.ca.
Good morning, Manchester. I'm DJ Dave, and this is traffic in your own backyard in the city. Bridge inspection from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. today on the Notre Dame Bridge. Expect lane closures in the eastbound lanes. Moderate to heavy volume on 101 in Kathy Benuck's backyard. That's Bedford. No issues to or from the Seacoast. No issues to or from Concord. Everett Turnpike looking good. And I-93 for the most part looking good. If you're headed south into Mass, there is heavy volume on 93 after the interchange for 495 all the way into Boston. If you see traffic trouble, you can always share it with us at 672-0573. Stay tuned for Al. He's got weather next.
It's Weather with Al.
Good morning, Manchester. Forecast for today, some
Heavy rain possible still early this morning, and isolated thunderstorms will move off the coast this morning. Some partial clearing will take place today, 65 to 70 degrees, northwest winds 10 to 20 miles per hour with some higher gusts. Mostly clear tonight, chilly, 36 to 43 degrees. For tomorrow, we will have a mixture of sun and clouds, high temperatures on Thursday in the 60s. Friday, mixture of sun and clouds, a little milder, low 70s. And it looks like we'll be in the middle 70s with some sunshine on Saturday. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Al Caprillion. For more extensive forecast, you can go to GirardLodge.com. This is WBIN TV meteorologist Al Caprillion for Girard Lodge Weather.
Girard Lodge time is 7:18. We continue with Kathy Benuck, Bedford's troublemaker. Kathy, there was one point. Now, there was something that the town's lawyer, the town's attorney, did with respect to the behavior manifesto. We want to make sure that even though it has been adopted by the town council and will no doubt be followed by the town council, apparently it may not be imposed on members of any board according to the town's attorney. What was the deal there?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that it will be followed by every member of the town council.
But some of them have proven to be rather flagrant violators of
sort of on occasion,
yes,
yeah. But yeah, apparently the town attorney did have some legal concerns about all of this because it was reported at the town council meeting last week when they were going to vote on this that he had advised them that they cannot force anyone to sign that they are agreeing to the rules set forth in the Code of Conduct. All they can do is have people sign that they have received the Code of Conduct and other materials. So I thought that was kind of intriguing.
Yeah.
Gee, do they think that maybe this might be a tad illegal?
Well, in Goffstown, they tried to force school board member Dan Cloutier to sign their ethics policy, and he basically told them to pound sand, and it turns out he's about the only one on that board who hasn't violated it by their own conduct. But you have also been critical of town councilors for them using their position as town councilors, as elected officials, to go around and solicit donations from Bedford town businesses to support a party that they were throwing for the town employees.
I definitely have been critical of that.
So tell us, and that led to a rather interesting email that you received quite by accident, I guess, from Town Council Chairman Bill Dermody, who we did, by the way, contact yesterday. Sent him an email.
Didn't hear from him.
No, we sent him an email with several questions regarding the material that you forwarded to us and asking him to respond. We also, by the way, filed an official right-to-know request with Chairman Dermody, asking, since he made the statement at the Bedford Town Council meeting, that he'd gotten lots of feedback on the Town Council Code of Conduct from various members of boards and commissions. I asked him how many people he heard from, how many were positive and negative, and to forward any and all written communication, including email, under the right-to-know law, so we could see what people on the boards were saying. But tell me what because you sent an email to Councilman Dermody.
Yes.
And he sent a reply to you that wasn't intended to go to you. We'll be posting that up at Oh My Blog later this morning, as well as my questions to Chairman Dermody. What happened there?
Well, of course, when I send him an email, I never know if I'll get an answer. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And as I said in the blog this morning, I'm not sure if it's based on his mood or the subject matter or just the phase of the moon that dictates when and if he answers. And you mentioned right to know. Don't take that too seriously that they will respond to it, because we do have a record here of lots of playing with that and lots of times not getting responses back, even with a right-to-know request. Yeah. But in any event,
that's
yes, I did.
Unfortunately not unique. That's a problem everywhere.
True. Well, I did send him an email because when I guess maybe they weren't collecting donations from donations with those little quote things around it from local businesses that they were soliciting for gifts for town employees at their little luncheon. He did put something in the newspapers saying that they would love to get more donations and kind of promised everybody that if they gave, he'd put out a list afterwards so that everybody would know what great public-spirited businesses we have in Bedford. So after the event was over, I did send him an email and said, so I'd like to see the list of those businesses or individuals who made partial or full contributions. And again, not knowing if I'd get an answer. Well, he did send me back a sort of terse reply, which is kind of common in our communications. He didn't provide the list, but instead told me to read Patch, because apparently earlier that day he had sent off something to them. But what I found extraordinarily amusing was that, I don't know if he was in a hurry or doesn't check things or just exactly what happened, but with that email, I got the email in which he had discussed my request with another town councilor and was kind of complaining and saying that he had sought legal advice before he answered me, which is
From that town councilor.
From another town councilor. Mm-hmm. And, which that struck me as a little strange. I mean, why do you have to talk to a lawyer to answer an email? About something you said you were going to make public anyway. And he kind of commented that I'd have to take what he gave me, and that he wasn't going to supply any more ammunition.
Well, the question that I asked him about that in my email was, I'd appreciate knowing why you as chairman of the town council believe it is okay for elected officials to solicit donations from town businesses, which are subject to the town's multiple regulatory apparati, to support a party the councilors are hosting for the employees who do the regulating, among others, of course, for paying and paying for their personal funds. Mm-hmm. So, if you think about it, I can only imagine, having been a Manchester alderman, if I were knocking on businesses' doors asking them to give me gift cards or other donations for a party that I was throwing with my own money for the employees that do the regulating of their businesses, among others.
Well, I had complained about that from the get-go. I mean, when I was hearing all these grand plans, all I could think of was the Soprano television shows, I mean, seriously. Does it pass the smell test? I don't think so.
Well, even if there is no malintent in doing it, even if there is no real threat or intimidation, and maybe the thought never crossed any of their minds, just the appearance of elected officials soliciting for a function that they're paying for, because they're paying for it out of pocket, not the taxpayers.
Yeah, I guess they kicked in $100 each.
Yeah, something like that. So they're paying for this thing, and then they want to add to what they're doing by getting donations from various businesses. Maybe there's nothing poor in their intent, but it sure doesn't look right.
Absolutely not.
I mean, they
Public
sit in
perception.
authority. Yeah, they sit in authority over these
That's
folks.
right. That's right. And, I mean, in blogs, I said to businesses, if you see one of them in the parking lot heading towards you, put the close sign in the door.
Right. So you got a hold of an email that basically said, was sort of...
Chairman Dermody's oops moment.
Yeah, him sort of outing himself in what he thought of you. And, it was interesting. I didn't know what he meant, and I asked, well, what does it mean that, she'll have to take what I give her? I don't quite understand that. You've got a blog about that at Bedford Patch, correct?
I do. What's up today?
And I will put it up at my blog after the show this morning so that people can read the entire email exchange. And as I did in the email to Chairman Dermody, who I don't know.
I didn't put the whole email exchange, but I did put what my comments to him were. Some of my comments when I emailed him immediately to say, oops, Bill, I don't think you meant to send me this.
Yeah. Well, I will publish the whole email exchange. And one of the questions I have is, why is he seeking legal advice from Councilor Bandazian, who apparently is an attorney, instead of going to the town attorney? Is Councilor Bandazian somehow bonded by the town or indemnified? Is this the only time he's given legal advice? I mean, I think there are some questions there.
I agree. And this is something that...
I guess the thing that strikes me, just if I can interrupt, the thing that strikes me here is, why the reaction I mean, the questions, and people will see them, the questions that you asked in that were fairly straightforward. Frankly, I can see them thinking you're kind of like a pain in their neck.
Sure,
because you're interfering with what they want to do the way they want to do it, but you still are a citizen. They are legitimate questions, and I guess my whole thought on it is, if you're okay with what you're doing, why don't you just say, I'm okay with it for the following reasons, and leave it at that?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we consulting with, attorneys who aren't official representatives of the town, at least not in that capacity, passing it around to other counselors to try to get other feedback? I just don't get it.
Well, I guess maybe I have a suspicious nature, because anytime somebody acts peculiar, it usually means there are peculiarities.
Okay, continuing now with Kathy Benuck, and of Bedford, producer of the television show Tell It Like It Is for Bedford Community Television, also a member of the Bedford Community Television's board, at least until this coming March, and then you're on the naughty list.
After that?
You're on the naughty list. You're not on the nice list, so we'll find out. But there was an incident that took place at the Bedford polling place. We have had correspondence with moderator Brian Shaughnessy over it, and apparently you were almost not allowed to vote in what was apparently a very upsetting turn of events, and believe you may have been singled out for your political outspokenness in the town of Bedford. Why don't you share with our listeners what took place? Because, it's like Bill Wynn getting tossed out of a school board meeting in Goffstown, where the elected official did not like Mr. Wynn and therefore made a scene and a fuss, and he was told to move his cameras or leave, and he left. Anyway, what happened in Bedford?
Well, my husband and I went to vote together. And when we went late afternoon, I believe we were the only people checking in at all at that time of day. I mean, the place was practically empty.
Everyone knew you were coming and they cleared the place, right?
Perhaps, yeah. The camera trained on my house must have told them I was on my way. I don't know. But anyway, when we got there, it just happened that he spoke his name and address first, and one of the clerks who we were at the table of definitely knows who both of us are. And he, of course, did have his driver's license in hand for identification, and she closely looked at his license, closely looked at the voters list, looked at him, looked at the list, and checked him in and gave him his ballots. So then I turned over my driver's license, and she looked at it long enough to imprint it on her brain, I guess, and then looked at the list and kept going back and forth, and then said, your driver's license address doesn't match the address on the voter list. Well, I mean, I did not.
Did your husband have the same address on his license that you had?
Absolutely. Our licenses say the same thing.
And your voter registration
on the voter list.
So there was no difference between the address. No, okay.
Absolutely.
So your husband gets checked through, and
he does.
You get flagged.
Yes. And I did not make a big issue out of the fact that there was nothing saying that clerks had to check our addresses as part of all these new regulations or anything. But, I kind of was very quiet and mellow and didn't see any need to make a big deal.
Did you think at the time you were being singled out for mistreatment?
Given the person who was behind the table, she does sort of carry with her a reputation for being a little difficult, so I thought she might be playing with me, but again, I didn't comment. So she then, did, as I say, mention the differences in addresses, and I very calmly explained to her, well, that was easily explainable, that the town had changed our street address due to our big road construction project, which was why the change was showing on the voter list, but because I had not yet renewed my driver's license, it wasn't due to be renewed, my driver's license continued to show the same address that I had lived at for 15 years. Mm-hmm. Well, she said she had to check on that and dashed away. And we kind of stood there a little puzzled. And she was gone long enough that the line that didn't exist behind us when this started did exist by the time she returned. And kind of said reluctantly that she was giving me a ballot. She was told she could. but said that I really needed to take care of this with the Division of Motor Vehicles, or I wouldn't be allowed to vote in November. Well, I could have discussed it further at that point, but the people behind us were getting a little upset, so I took my ballot and went and voted. But as you might guess, the next morning, I did send off an email to the town moderator questioning whether I had misunderstood the new laws or regulations.
The town moderator being Brian Shaughnessy.
Or misunderstood the things that he said on his BCTV show telling what would be required at the polls, because I wasn't aware of having to verify an address or a change of address, and having worked at the polls myself for several years on voted check-in and check-out, that if somebody had an address change, the modus operandi was you simply noted it on the form.
So you filed a complaint then with the town moderator, and what did you get for a response from Moderator Shaughnessy?
Oh my goodness. It was such a huge email.
It was, I mean, I've seen it. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he expressed concern. I mean, I'll give him that. And he did kind of say that as new town moderator, he was still a rookie at this, and they were still trying out things and so on. And he did suggest that possibly the check-in clerk made a wrong decision. And he even said something to the effect of perhaps she unduly used her power. And said he'd look into it, and that...
Well, I sent him an email because what struck me about his response, and he said that, he said that she shouldn't have done what she did, but I was concerned that he did not in any way address the disparate treatment. It would be one thing if you walked in there by yourself, and you went through what you went through. But you walked in there with your husband. You have the same addresses on your driver's licenses. You have the same addresses on your voter checklist, and you had the exact same issue. And so what it really boils down to, and what I was surprised he wasn't looking into, was whether or not you were singled out for mistreatment, given that set of facts. I mean, aside from the fact that the woman's known you for how many years?
Oh, well, I've been in town for almost 16. I don't know when I first made it onto her radar screen, but she certainly knows who I am. So
I asked him about that. I sent him an email, which I will publish today after the show, and he did reply.
Yeah, I did see his response.
Yes, because he copied you on it. He did reply to my question, which is why did you not mention the disparate treatment? And his response to me was, I do not believe I neglected or intentionally not answer any question posed by Mrs. Benuck. She observed that her husband was not treated the same way and asked why she was treated the way she was. There was no specific question posed about her husband, and if there was, I could not possibly answer that question without discussing the matter with Mrs. Taft first, Taft being the ballot clerk, or the selectman, whatever she is.
No, just a ballot clerk.
Okay. I clearly advised that our ballot clerk was wrong. Yes, you did. And should not have detained Mrs. Benuck regarding the disparity between the address on the license and the checklist. I can only assume that with certain degree of confidence that Mrs. Benuck believes she was singled out based on personal animosity between her and Mrs. Taft, but I have no direct knowledge of their history or reasons why that animosity might exist. First of all, is there any history between you and Mrs. Taft?
Absolutely none. I know who she is. She knows who I am. I don't think I've never had a conversation with the woman.
Is she active in town politics at all?
She's kind of well known for various antics.
Is she a Republican, a Democrat? Has she been involved in any recent elections there?
Oh, she was involved in recent elections because I don't know if you remember back prior to the town election in March. On my Tell It Like It Is show, I did do 3 shows related to the race between
Rick Bullock, the prior
moderator, and Brian Shaughnessy, of course, who won the election.
Remember it well. We featured it here on the show.
Correct. And I did a first show with Brian, followed a few minutes later by one with Rick, and then a show following up. And Ms. Taft, even though I had set very, very clear rules that everybody was aware of for a closed set because of the animosity that was going on, Ms. Taft did show up at the BCTV studio demanding to be allowed into the control room to watch my show as it was being done with Mr. Bullock. And, of course, was not allowed to, and carried on quite a bit, saying that it was a public building and nobody could deny her access. She was very angry when she was asked to leave the building, so the only thing I can think of is because I set the rules, she was angry at me as well, because her attempt to interfere in whatever it was she planned to do was thwarted by my rules.
Now, had she otherwise been involved in that election campaign between Bullock and Shaughnessy?
You could say so, because very prominent in the Bedford newspapers was a great big photograph of Ms. Taft and Bill Greiner pounding signs into locations on Route 101 that were extremely defamatory to Mr. Bullock. And they both had great big smiles on their faces. So, yeah, I would say that constitutes being involved in the campaign of who is now town moderator Brian Shaughnessy.
So, all right. So do you believe that she is a partisan of Shaughnessy's? Do you believe that he is honestly going to investigate what appears to be a singling out of you for mistreatment at the polls?
Well, I think it's pretty evidentiary, particularly where she had signs all over her yard for him, that she is a supporter and a friend of Shaughnessy. I can't speak to his reaction to all of this. I would hope that if nothing else, the fact that he's a lawyer might make him think that he really needs to be very ethical in this situation.
In his reply to you, did he mention that he either had or would be looking into what happened to you at the polls, or did he just sort of answer your question in the hypothetical ether, saying, "Yeah, it shouldn't have happened, and we'll make sure to address it with her and more training of the poll workers"?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, so I don't remember the exact words, but I believe that he did say he would discuss it with her. So what will come of that, I don't know. But I did follow up saying to him that I thought that she clearly was not somebody who should be working at the polls in a position where she dealt with the public.
We continue now with Bedford's Kathy Benuck. She's the host of Tell It Like It Is on Bedford Community Television, which you can see on Channel 16 if you live in the town of Bedford, or you can get to bedford.org, isn't it?
Nope, www.bedfordtv.com.
Okay.
Click on Channel 16 Daily Schedule. Next page, enter Tell It Like It Is in the search box, and voila, up
You
they
have
come.
all the shows that you've done, and of course you have a YouTube channel too, right?
Yes, a lot of the shows do make it onto YouTube, yes.
Okay. And there were some other irregularities that you asked both the town clerk and the ward, not the ward moderator, but the town moderator about, things that you didn't think were correct. What were your concerns? And polling place stuff is always a concern. You had your specific issue where you were apparently singled out for mistreatment by somebody who was a supporter of the current town moderator by virtue of her activity against the last town moderator in the last election. I guess we'll make the connection that way. What else was going on at the polls that you raised some questions about, and what have you gotten for responses from either the moderator or the clerk on those matters?
Well, the questions that I raised, first bunch were kind of practical, related to statistics as to how many workers there were and such. Since Mr. Shaughnessy had kind of made a big campaign deal about the number of people previously working at the polls and said that he would change that. So I was kind of curious, although it would be comparing apples to oranges where this was a low turnout election, obviously. But the other...
What is it with Bedford anyway? That town does not... You pride yourselves in being last in the state to give any numbers, or what?
Well, that was where my next question came in. Because I know that a lot of people were waiting for the Bedford results, and they did seem to be rather late, 10 o'clock at night, for what amounted to a very small turnout. And I personally heard from some candidates themselves on Tuesday night. Actually saw one in person at an event, who were very, very concerned and wondering what was going on because the ballots were so slow in being tabulated and such. So I did raise a question to Brian Shaughnessy saying, so what was going on? I heard there were problems. And he, I guess, sort of answered, if you will, but he went on to, again, a very long explanation and, among other things, claimed that the town clerk had never been made privy to how the election was run before by the former moderator, Rick Bullock, and also said that a couple of people had apologized for not knowing what to do because, again, Rick Bullock, as he put it, held everything close to the vest.
Well, yeah, but in all fairness, Bedford did not report out anywhere near a reasonable hour under the prior monitor. Yeah, it was
10 o'clock.
At least 10 o'clock.
But so he sort of answered, as I said, and he did say that he would forward some of my questions to Ms. Radke for an answer.
Radke
and I
being
did,
the town clerk?
The town clerk. And I did get an email from her with all kinds of numbers in it a couple of days ago, and to be honest with you, I really haven't had time to sit and analyze it and answer her if I had further questions. But she had indicated that she had never been trained and so on, and I knew that to be incorrect. I knew that and said so in my response to Shaughnessy because Ms. Radke most very definitely every election was involved in the process of the testing of all the ballot machines. And that is indisputable. So to now portray to anybody, either she or Shaughnessy, that were not the case, I mean, that's just flagrantly wrong because she was involved every time.
Now, your town clerk is involved in something of another controversy. Apparently, she
I think so.
went to court and had a bench warrant issued. Well, she went to court on a Bedford citizen who failed to register his dog in time. And apparently there was a court date.
Offense.
Apparently, well, no, I mean, but, you know, abuse of power by elected officials is something that we need to be wary of at all levels, whether it's the chairman of the Goffstown School Board telling Bill Wynn he can't have his cameras where he wants them, and calling the police to enforce his dictates.
Mm-hmm.
Rich, I have a question. Was this dog a Pekingese? Because those things could be vicious.
or is it, so the town clerk, now I don't know how, and I've done a little bit of digging on this to know that it is very unusual for the town of Bedford to go to court on someone who has missed their dog license registration. Apparently, the citizen did not show up, and a bench warrant was issued for his arrest.
There was, yes.
And I understand that the man was pulled over on Route 101 by the Bedford police.
No, not 101, down by Target.
Okay.
Yeah.
Down by Target, Route 3, and taken to jail.
Yeah, he was arrested, and he
Now,
did have to make bail.
You know who this citizen is,
I do.
And it seems that he, like yourself, has been outspoken of some of the town's issues. What exactly has he been outspoken about, and how does it relate to the town clerk, and might there not? And I'm also learning that it's extraordinarily rare, like maybe happened one other time in the last 20 years where the town had a bench warrant issued for a delinquent dog registration.
Well, it does seem rather harsh, doesn't it? I don't know how outspoken he personally has been, and I've never met the man personally. But where it gets interesting is he is absolutely a central figure in the whole Talon land controversy that is still an ongoing issue in Bedford. And for those who don't know what we're talking about, back in 2009, the town seized the Tar Wildlife Sanctuary for back taxes that totaled like about $3,000. I offhand don't have the figure right in
Rick
front of
Bullock
me.
was involved with this trust
Yes,
himself.
he was. He was one of the trustees.
So there's another connection.
As was this individual who was arrested. He also was one of the trustees of the Tar Trust. So it all gets kind of interesting because the Tar Trust, of course, fought back, and this is still ongoing. And a lot of rules, laws, and so on were broken with regard to the seizure of the Town Wildlife Sanctuary. There is a federal lawsuit, and we, the taxpayers, have been stuck for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of legal fees and such, as the town continues to keep its feet deep in the sand, saying they had a right to take the land.
Now, does the town clerk, who is an elected official in Bedford, does she have any direct role or involvement with this tar trust issue on behalf of the town?
I would say she would not. I mean, I can't imagine why she would, unless she has to authorize documents or something. But is she somebody who has had dealings with some of the major figures in the whole situation? Absolutely.
So what are you trying to say? There's a little, perhaps, collusion among various officials in Bedford to try to bring it back to the behavior manifesto, to try to silence their critics by various means, whether it's them being hassled at the polls, having the naughty letter sent, being arrested by the police because a bench warrant was issued because you were delinquent on a $25 dog registration?
Well, I mean, I can say this. I'd love to hang around town office building and have one of those glasses up against the wall with my ear on the other side.
Kathy Benuck. Keep telling it like it is in Bedford. You can learn more by going to bedfordtv.com and finding Tell It Like It Is. You can also find her YouTube channel. This interview, as well as all of the emails that she has provided and we have sent to Moderator Shaughnessy and Council Chairman Dermody, will be posted sometime today. So check into my blog. Now you know why we named it that, at GirardAtLarge.com. And you can, of course, always catch Kathy's blog posts at Bedford Patch, which is Bedford, it's bedford-nh.patch.com. That's bedford-nh.patch.com. And if you can't remember that, just put it in your search bar and put Bedford NH Patch, and it will come up. Kathy, thank you for joining us here this morning on Girard at Large. Suddenly I feel better about Manchester.
Thanks, they're always fun to come and see.
And I'm sure the people of Goffstown feel better about Goffstown, too, given all this stuff. But I tell you, it just goes to show an active local media digging around on this stuff will at least get people asking questions, and that's what we're here to do.
WLMW 90.7 FM.
It's uplifting and powerful, and it's a good message all around.
New Hampshire Family Radio.
It's just a good station to listen to.